Today I'm going to be covering what a muscle imbalance is, how you can find your own muscle imbalances, and even how to structure a simple treatment plan for it. Let's get into it. So what is a muscle imbalance? Basically, it's when one muscle in a group of muscles that control the same joint has extra tension on it, making that same joint become off balance. Now, an example of a muscle imbalance would be the pecs in the front becoming overly tight, creating rounded shoulders, which pulls the joint out of place, this resulting in the upper back becoming extremely weak. So when you have rounded shoulders, you have the upper back and the pecs that are imbalanced with tension, resulting in the shoulders coming forward. Or you may have your head tilted to the side or even rotated, and if that's the case, this is still a muscle imbalance because the head wants to be perfectly straight on top of the shoulders, not one way or another. Now, muscle imbalances can happen from anything, including your work, your hobbies, and your current lifestyle. This means everything you do, from the direction you lean on the couch to which hand you use during your alone time, you little perv, all these are going to dictate how your muscle imbalances are formed. Now, one of the best ways to tell if you have a muscle imbalance is by taking your own posture images. What you will need to do is take two photos of yourself, one in the front view and one in the side view. Now make sure to remove your shoes during the photos and to wear workout attire or a swimsuit. You are the only one seeing these photos, and we need to be able to identify the bony landmarks to tell if we have any muscle imbalances. And finally, make sure to use a friend or a timer on your camera while taking your photos. You don't want to be trying to take your own selfies here because then it could ruin your posture and messing up the results for your imbalances. And once you've taken your photos, then get some notes ready with your images because we're now going to be comparing it to the photos shown. And these photos right here are going to tell us which muscles are creating your imbalance and which muscles you need to work on in order to treat it. And if you want your own free copy of this, then make sure to click on the link in the description below. Now, the way these images work is we're going to be reading it from top to bottom, one color section at a time. And all we're simply doing is comparing it to the posture image we took in order to find the muscle imbalances. So starting with section number one, the red section on the front view, what we're doing here is we're simply going to be looking at this posture and we're going to be comparing it to our own images. Here you can see that there are two green lines going across the body, one across the shoulders and the one straight down the middle of the head. These lines represent muscles being balanced, which means if you find that your head is tilted to one side or another or rotated, then it could be the muscles that are written down in the red section creating that muscle imbalance in the first place. So for example, if you find that you have one head tilted to one side or another, then that will be a sign that those muscles are creating a muscle imbalance. If your head's tilting to the left, then it'll be the left side creating the imbalance. If your head's tilting to the right, then it will be the right side creating the imbalance. And you know which muscles there are because they're going to be labeled in the red section. Or you may have one shoulder that is lifted higher than the other. This again shows that green line getting tilted up, which indicates a muscle imbalance on that side. And again, it will still be the same muscles that are labeled in the red section. Now, throughout all these PDFs, you will notice that there are some words that are italicized. In this case, in the red section, it's going to be the SCM and the upper traps. And what this means is all the muscles that are italicized have special rules, and we'll be going over those special rules as we go through the muscles. So when it comes to the first section, if you only have a tilt in one way or another, then it's going to be all the muscles labeled in that red section creating that muscle imbalance. But if you have a rotation going one way or another, then it's going to be the muscles italicized creating that imbalance, and it's going to be the muscles on the opposite side. So remember, if the head is rotated, it's the opposite side, the muscles italicized. If your head is only tilted, then it's all the muscles that are labeled on that same side. And finally, there's actually one other way to tell which muscles are creating your imbalance, and that is to look at the right angles and determine which one is less than 90 degrees. So again, here with perfect posture, we can see if we draw a line here and a line here, we get a perfect 90 degrees right in that right angle. But if we had a tilt going one way or another, let's just say this is tilted this way, well, what would end up happening is that angle drops to less than 90 degrees, and this one becomes more than 90 degrees. And with this being said, all you have to do is look for the side with less than 90 degrees, and that will be the side creating all of the problems, creating the muscle imbalance. So all you have to do is just look which muscles are falling into that extra section, the color section, or you have to look at the different angles and see which one is less than 90 degrees to determine which muscles are creating your muscle imbalance. All right, moving on to the blue section. All we're doing here is comparing our shoulders being level to the sternum. And if we end up seeing one shoulder being dropped versus the other, then this is going to be a sign that the pec on that side, the pec group, including the anterior delt and even the subscap, may be the reason for that muscle imbalance. So if you have your left side dropping, it may be an indication of the pec and all that on that side creating those issues. So one question I get here is, if my left shoulder is dropping, that will force my right shoulder up, which then closes the angle between the head on the right side and closes the angle on the chest as well. If that's the case, do I work on both sides at the same time? Yes, you do technically, because when one side pulls down, the other side is going to be pulling up at the same time, creating your muscle imbalances. So that means you can have your right shoulder up with tight neck muscles, and you can have your left shoulder dropped with tight left pec, which means you have to work on both of them to address your muscle imbalance. Now moving on to the green section, part 3. What we're doing here is we're simply looking at both lines, top and bottom, and we're going to be seeing if there's anything that is less than 90 degrees within those right angles. Or you can end up seeing if there's a tilt between those lines. What these lines are on, they are on the ASIS in the front hip bones, and they are on the ribs in the front, basically just trying to show if they are level. If they are not level, whichever side has that less than 90 degrees on, that may be an indication that those muscles are creating a muscle imbalance. And again, those muscles are the QL, quadratus lumborum, could be the psoas, or it can even be the lumbar erectors. So this means if the ribs are tilted down and the hips are tilted up, then it's probably going to be all the muscles on this side creating that muscle imbalance. Or you may have both lines going parallel with each other where they're both kind of going up here in this direction. And again, this still will be a sign that there might be overactivity on this side, or there might be overactivity on this side as well. We're not sure, but this is what creates these muscle imbalances, especially in the core area. Now in reading part 4, all we're going to be doing here is simply asking ourselves, do our legs rotate inward or outward when we are looking at our own posture analysis? If your legs are swinging out or rotating outwards, it may be a sign of the muscles in orange creating that muscle imbalance. But if your legs are going inward or even getting closer together, then that might be a sign of the muscles in purple creating your muscle imbalance. Now the TFL is italicized, and the reason why is because it can perform both actions here. It can internally rotate the leg, leading to it looking like it's more in the purple section, or it can abduct the leg away from the rest of the body, making it look like it's more in the orange section. So long story short, you pretty much just have to release the TFL if it's rotating in or out. So keeping to the same pattern we were doing, now looking at the side view, we're going to be starting with section number 1, which includes both the purple and the red colors here. So all we're going to do again is simply compare our posture to the image shown, and we're going to ask ourselves, is my neck more forward in front of the line, or is it more back? If you end up having more of a military neck and things like that, then you may have your head pulled a little bit farther back than most people. Or you may have something like a forward head posture where your head's getting pulled more forward into the red section, indicating the scalenes and the SCA may be responsible for your muscle imbalance. If my head was in a forward head posture, then that line will be a little more going this direction, which shows that the angle is now less than 90 degrees on this side, which again shows that it may be these muscles in the front responsible for your muscle imbalance. Now there are two muscles italicized, and that is the suboccipitals and the deep cervical flexors. Now I will not go over these right now because they will come in handy later on when we're talking about the treatment plan. Now moving on to section number 2, we have the dark blue and the light blue colors here. And what we're pretty much looking for here is we're going to be looking to see if the shoulders are pulled forward into the anterior position, which will indicate tight pecs and all that. Now, fun fact here, for all of you who have upper cross syndrome, it's actually going to be the top 2 sections here that create your muscle imbalances. You have the pecs and the shoulder, which basically pulls the body forward. What this does now is it pulls the neck forward and the head, creating forward head posture, which then forces the upper traps and the suboccipitals to activate and turn on for us to look forward. All 3 of these things activate and become contracted at the same time, which leads to a muscle imbalance. So if you're someone who has rounded shoulders and forward head posture, then there's a good chance you're going to have to work on all 3 of these muscle groups. All right, moving on to section number 3 now, we're looking more in the core and the lower back areas. Again, we are trying to tell, do we have a straight pelvis and is it lined up with our ribs? If it's not, it may be an indication of these muscles creating that muscle imbalance. Especially if you have something like an anterior pelvic tilt, it's most likely the muscles in the lower back creating that tilt. Or if you have a posterior pelvic tilt, then it'll be the muscles in the pink creating that as well. Oh, and by the way, the pelvis should be naturally tilted forward roughly 4 to 13 degrees. So if you do have a small tilt to the forward, then that's perfectly okay. This chart and image is meant to be kept very simple because guess what? Our spine is also not straight like the line shows. Just saying. And part 4 follows the same exact pattern here, where if there is a tilt going towards the front, most likely it's going to be the muscles like the hip flexors creating that imbalance. Or if you're someone who has a posterior pelvic tilt, then it may be the opposite direction, indicating the glutes and the hamstrings creating your muscle imbalance. And of course, whatever happens at the bottom will also affect anything at the top. Meaning if you have an imbalance in your legs, you might also have an imbalance in your hips. Now that you have an idea of which muscles are creating your muscle imbalance, here's how you can begin treating it. All the muscles that are creating your muscle imbalances needs to first be released and then restored in order to improve your posture. And the best way to start off releasing is with self-massage techniques. Because what ends up happening is when these muscles become imbalanced, they also develop things like trigger points, fascia restrictions, and the nervous system within those muscles become overactive. Which is why we have to self-massage all these muscles first to get rid of all that junk and relax the nervous system. Now once you're done self-massaging all those muscles, you then have to stretch out those same exact muscles in order to rebalance the joints. If you're here just trying to self-massage the neck muscles here and without stretching it, then your neck posture is going to remain exactly the same. But if you try to stretch it without releasing those knots and trigger points, then you won't be seeing very much improvement, at least not for a very long time. So make sure you self-massage and stretch all the muscles creating your muscle imbalance. But wait, you may be asking, what about the weaker muscles my doctor told me to exercise? And you're gonna love this shit. All you have to do is exercise the muscles opposite to the ones that are creating the muscle imbalance. So for example, if you have your head tilted to the right, if your head's over here, okay, and your head's tilted to the right, what this means is what we need to do is release and stretch these muscles out on this side so we can realign our head straight to the neutral. But once you're done releasing those muscles, you then need to train the opposite side here in order to help secure that brand new posture. Or you may end up having a hip hike on the right side, indicating overactivity, and you need to release the muscles on the right side here. Well, once you're done releasing all those muscles, you then have to train the opposite side in order to secure a better posture, or else you're just going to go back to that same way you were before. So for example, if you have something like a military neck where you're going straight up, then you may need to exercise the opposite side, but only after you release and stretch that side first. And this is actually where our italicized muscles, the deep cervical flexors and the occipitals, come into play. Because if you end up having forward head posture here, then once you release and stretch that side, you then have to exercise the opposite side, which in this case is the italicized muscles, the deep cervical flexors and your suboccipitals. Now real quick, I just want to point out an error that I said earlier. Whenever you have forward head posture, the muscles like the scalenes and the SCM become overactive, but also the muscles like the occipitals. That's why it is italicized. And the reason why is when you get that forward head posture, our eyes end up looking down. So the suboccipitals will help us look up by contracting. So if you have scalenes, or sorry, if you have a forward head posture, then chances are you to release those muscles in the front and the suboccipitals in the back. On top of that, the muscle you're supposed to train is only the deep cervical flexors, and that is why both those muscles are italicized. Or if you end up having something like rounded shoulders, again, releasing the chest and then stretching it will help realign everything up, and then exercising the upper back muscles like the rhomboids and the mid-traps will help secure that brand new posture. And that's how you create your own treatment plan. Release all the muscles creating your imbalance, stretch those muscles out to rebalance everything, and then exercise the opposite side in order to secure your brand new posture. Or if you want myself or a member of my team to look at your posture, then head to painandstrength.com to learn more about it. That's it for this video. My name's Adam, and if you stuck around for this long, then I just want to say thank you, and I'll see you later.